Do you have a vision for your business? We hope so. Evangelizing the problems that your business solves for your customers creates clear, meaningful connection points between you and the people you serve. But say you're wandering into a new space, one where you have no experience whatsoever. You're walking on shaky ground. There's a laundry list of new things to learn. How do you communicate your vision then? With $500 in a basement in St. Catharines, Ontario, Jenn Harper started Cheekbone Beauty. She had zero experience working in a beauty space, making the leap from a career in the food industry's hospitality and sales sector. Like all great entrepreneurs, Jenn's vision eventually rocketed the company to earn multi-million-dollar revenues. But unlike other founders, Jenn's vision was literal. In January 2015, a dream popped into her head of three little indigenous girls giggling and covered in lip gloss. That isn't to say Jenn's journey has been dreamlike. Battling alcoholism and intergenerational trauma, she started Cheekbone on the side. But today, Cheekbone Beauty sells every kind of color cosmetic you can think of in stores like Sephora and JC Penny, all while staying true to the brand's indigenous roots. Not bad for a first-timer. You're about to hear how Jenn carved out a unique space in the nearly $600 billion beauty industry as a newcomer. You'll hear how her cultural background served as a guiding light, her greatest advice for entrepreneurs venturing into new industries, and the practical methods she used to quickly scale her company to the next level. I'm Catherine Vasilopoulos, and this is And So She Left, the podcast about incredible women founders and the wisdom they uncovered beyond the corporate world. It all started with a dream of three young Indigenous girls. Jenn's peaks and valleys alike have been shaped by her Canadian indigeneity, just like the rest of her family members. These experiences have molded her brand into what it is today, and they seemed as good a place to start as any.
Back in January of 2015, I had a dream of three native little girls covered in lip gloss. And really what I remember the most is their rosy little cheeks, their brown skin. I grabbed my laptop that evening and starting to write out what is the foundation of our brand to this day. And that was to figure out how to make a product. And at the time it was lip gloss, and use a portion of the profits to support my community, which I really didn't know what that looked like. But the whole idea that I had thought of back then was to create some kind of scholarship fund that we could support Indigenous youth with. And fast forward to where we are today, I'm certainly proud that we've been able to do that. But when I think about the backstory and how and why and when this dream came in this part of my life, it's really interesting. 2 months prior to this dream, I had gotten sober. I had battled alcoholism for many years. On November 26, 2014, I got sober, and I've probably been sober ever since. But 2 months later, I have this, what I call a life-changing dream. So entering the beauty industry with no experience whatsoever, having no money, took that dream and started doing, a couple years I really spent in really developing and building the brand before we actually launched in November of 2016.
Tell me more about what you think the symbolism was of those three little girls that you dreamt about. I'm very curious because it coincided very well with a moment in your life where you were going through a life-changing moment of becoming sober.
Yeah. I guess I've never thought too much about that. Because when people ask about this dream, I'm like, I very often don't remember dreams, but obviously certain times of our life, different things happen. And so just remembering their joy and their giggling, that's really what stood out to me the most. And when I think about the brand that we've built and the kind of community that has surrounded our brand, is really about people that are allies to our community and from our community that want to help me bring that kind of joy back to our community. And I feel like that's what Cheekbone Beauty has been able to do. I also was learning around that time in 2015 that my grandparents were both survivors of residential school in Canada. And since then, we've certainly understood how those school systems have negatively impacted our First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities in such a massive way, and really learning that my abuse of alcohol and addiction was part of this term that I learned, which was called generational or transgenerational trauma. When one group of people are impacted by an event that they're not equipped to deal with, and in the case it was my grandparents, and ultimately what generational trauma is, then it's passed on to the next generation. So my father, my aunties, my uncles, and then passed on to me and my siblings. And really tragically on this journey, I lost my brother BJ to suicide, which is horribly common among our First Nations communities, but again, also a symptom, if you will, of the residential school system and its negative impacts. And so when building Cheekbone Beauty, what I really started to learn and discover was, wow, we have the power of individuals not only to change our own lives, but my goal was to support and help my community see that we could really craft a new life for ourselves. We can change the narrative of what people think First Nations people are in this country. And I'm really proud that Cheekbone Beauty has been a part of changing the narrative.
Wow, that is quite the story. Having talked to so many guests in the previous episodes, I find that people adopt a lot of their entrepreneurial style to the values that they got from either their mom or their dad, watching them operate as their own business owners, or even not related at all to business ownership. So tell me more about your dad. What kind of lessons did you learn from him that maybe are now applicable to you as an entrepreneur?
I actually, I didn't grow up with him.
Oh, I see.
And I spent more time with my mom. So if I think about what I've learned from my dad, to be perfectly honest, not having a very good relationship with my father until I was about 38 years old. I was estranged from him for most of my life. One, because he had his own issues with alcohol. And as a young person, I really didn't want anything to do with that. So if I could say there's anything I've learned, it's how to be forgiving.
And what about your mom?
My mom and I have a great relationship, and she's taught me the most. And I would definitely say hard work, watching my mom raise us as a single mom for so many years, and the amount of hard work she puts in, and regardless of the job. That's one thing I love about the lessons from my mother is no matter what she did her best. And I definitely took that into every role that I've pursued.
Tell me about what kind of mind shift you had to go through in order to move from, a job in sales and marketing and going into becoming your own boss.
Yeah, there was lots. So for 3 years, I still worked my full-time day job selling seafood while building Cheekbone Beauty. I always say this completely unsustainable. I do not recommend it. But it was how I had to sort of build and prove the concept first before anyone would obviously invest. I knew not having any experience in the beauty space, not being a celebrity, is certainly things that would hold me back. And I had to prove that we had the potential to be something as a brand. And so I recognized that that's why working those insane hours for 3 years was really important for us to build. And I definitely knew that that would be required for me to actually ever feel comfortable taking funding or capital from any organization, or whether an investor, whether it's angel investors or institutional. I knew that I wanted to prove if this would even work first. When I think about the beauty space in general, there's no need for another brand to exist. There's so many, and it's so highly competitive. And so wanting to prove it out to myself first and market that was the path. And I really feel like there wasn't too much of a shift that needed to happen as a sales rep for the last it was like 12 years as a sales rep. That is like such a great training ground for any entrepreneur. You're going to get a lot of rejection. You're going to hear a lot of no's. And so I think building up my resiliency through that career was super helpful in turning into an entrepreneur. But also recognizing the ability to create something, all of the things that I really perhaps disliked about organizations that I worked for. When you become an entrepreneur, you have the ability to build whatever you want and build it how you would see or want your perfect company to be built. And so that's where I took so much pride in, was this idea, as an indigenous woman and as an Anishinaabe woman. We have some incredible teachings that come from our culture, and one is the 7 grandfather teachings. And so the core values that we've built at Cheekbone Beauty are based on those 7 grandfather teachings, and they're really just values and principles like respect, humility, love, courage, all of those things. And we've intertwined them into how we're building our organization.
And so you were primed already with the skills that you needed from having had your sales and marketing background. And it wasn't a big leap then to move on to being your own boss. Tell me more about the challenges that you faced with maybe funding or being in a very competitive, very saturated industry.
Oh my goodness. The competitive part, I don't think will ever go away. This is just such a highly competitive industry. We got really fortunate when it came to funding and capital. 3 years in, at the end of 2018, almost the beginning of 2019, I met an organization called Raven Capital. And so they were the first Indigenous-led social impact fund. No fund from our communities has ever existed in the way that Ravens built their fund. Not having experience in the space, but being an Indigenous woman at the time and meeting them, we certainly got lucky with a funding partner. We started to connect, and like any funding relationship, it takes quite some time to get to know one another. And Raven really did believe in this mission and idea that we've had for the brand. And so I was really grateful to have their support. And in August of 2019, we took a convertible debt as by way of funding from them. And then I was able to quit my job in seafood sales and go all in on the brand. And then that September of 2019, we also went on Dragon's Den, which was truly a pivotal moment for the brand, where we grew in an exponential way through our appearance on the show. And we've just been growing ever since.
Especially since you didn't have any background in the cosmetics industry. How did you build that kind of knowledge base?
It's so interesting. Literally started this business with that $500 in a corner of my basement in St. Catharines. And when I think about that, it is kind of wild because I had zero experience in this space. And now we're available in Sephora Canada in 56 locations, as well as we're available in 609 locations of JC Penny in the United States. And so how does a brand start with basically nothing and now end up a multi-million-dollar annual year brand? I think not knowing something sometimes, which I really think when I do a lot of speaking engagements, is the messaging that I want to express to people. Not knowing something about an industry can actually be a great way to start, because you're looking at everything through this new lens, right? And really being naive, almost childlike in a way, can help you see sort of that white space or what's missing in the industry. And so,
yeah, because you have fresh eyes, you don't know anything else. So you're going in with blank slate, right?
Exactly. And what was super helpful was this idea that I realized early on how actually easy it was for us to start. So the barrier to entry in these industries now, because of globalization, is quite low. You can manufacture our product, put your logo or branding on it, and you can call yourself a business. However, if you're not part of formulating or manufacturing of any kind, then you're really doing something that anyone can do. And that was about a year in when I recognized, I'm like, any fool could literally start a brand, right? It's if you can last or make it successful, that's the key, right? And so that's where things like marketing become really powerful. But what I did see was all of the space that needed improvement. And this industry, the beauty industry, is like to blame for, I don't know, 6 billion pieces of plastic waste annually. They're an enormously unsustainable industry. And so we started to look at it in this different way. If we were going to set ourselves apart from what everyone else was doing, then we had to think about things really differently. And that came down to innovation. And so, with the help and support of more funding from Raven Capital, I said to them, I'm like, okay, the way we started is not the way this brand is going to grow or be different. I really am passionate about figuring out how we can make formulations that are unique and define packaging options that are different from what exists in the world at this moment. And so went to them with this idea that we were going to build our own lab and manufacture our own products and hire our own team of scientists, which we ended up doing. I think to a lot of people's surprise, and working on really incredible innovations. Like, we're taking waste. We've worked on this project now for the last 3 years, from one of the wineries in Niagara, and we're extracting active ingredients from grape stems, skins, and seeds. And those actives have proven that this concept works and that we're going to put them in future formulations. And the reason we did that was, one, it's such a great way to sustainably use waste. And then secondly, in the beauty industry, much like the food industry, really, your ingredient list is on the exterior of your packaging. Everybody can read that. And any good chemist can reverse engineer and try to reformulate your formulations. And so, even though we had our own team of scientists and chemists working with our partners in manufacturing our own formulations and our products, we knew that at the very end of the day, it would be very simple for someone to copy what we were doing and what we were working on.
I'm listening to you talk now, and I'm imagining people, your consumers using your product. What kind of feedback have you been receiving from the users, and how are you changing their lives?
Yeah. So with our products, my favorite thing is reading customer reviews. And I am honestly blown away at the support of our client. It's almost, once we get a customer, we know we have the customer for life because they've just fallen in love with the product, that we've made things so simple for people to use. And in this beauty industry, I think for so long, it's always been like you needed the expert to help. Well, we've come at this like, I'm an amateur. I want to be able to do my makeup in 5 minutes and I want to look fantastic. And so we've created all of our products to meet that need, but also be safe for us and the planet at the same time. We're not housing things in plastic when we don't need to. And multi-purpose products, that's the whole idea that we're bringing into the world as well. So like, we have items that are meant to be used in multiple different ways so that someone doesn't have to buy like 16 different items. They could have a few and get and achieve the looks that they want. But because it's been built by someone who's considered an amateur in the space, it's made for people who are also amateurs, but want the look of being done by a professional. And so as a brand, we're built on 3 pillars: indigenous roots, being sustainable by nature, because indigenous people are the OGs of sustainability for thousands and thousands of years, and really innately have this deep relationship with all living things. And thirdly, we wanted to bring bold color to the clean category. I think in the clean beauty space for so long, it was like so muted, but we wanted to show, no, nature is just loaded with incredible color, and those are the pigments. And I love that the new blush that we just launched, people are falling in love with, of how easy it is to use at the same time.
Tell me what kind of advice you would give a young entrepreneur or someone who is planning to launch into a space they know nothing about.
Wow. Yeah, such a great question. I think the one reason that Cheekbone Beauty is successful is because we have consistently showed up. And I think consistency can be underrated. Every day for the last 7 years, I've woken up and done something to push the brand forward. And our team, then, now that it's a team and not just me, does something to move the brand forward. And we consistently sort of moving in that forward direction. And so I would say consistency. And then secondly, just passion, like making sure that the thing that you're working on, this idea that you're building or project, whatever it is, that you would wake up in the middle of the night and do it for free, because you need that kind of passion to make something succeed.
Oh, that's nice. What are you the most passionate about in your business?
The thing that I'm personally most passionate about is bringing this idea of representation on the grand scale. We were able to do some in-store eventing at Sephora because we were working on a campaign with them. And the one morning I walked into the Eaton Center and I looked up, and they do these massive billboards like the size of a transport truck around the top of the window features in the mall. And they had our branded picture and it said Cheekbone Beauty now available at Sephora. And I was like super emotional because as a young person, I loved going to the Eaton Center, but unfortunately had some negative experiences there. My father being accused of stealing as a little girl, or him arguing with the shopkeeper about our status card. And so never in a million years did my little mind think that I would one day own a brand available in an organization like Sephora, because they are the largest beauty retailer in the entire world. And those little thoughts, they didn't come into my head as a child. And how unfortunate is that? And so that evening, I got to do the eventing in the Eaton Center location, and we were just there putting blush and really connecting with the Sephora community and clients. But sure enough, in walks this family, and they're Anishinaabe or Ojibwe like me. And this little girl, 12 years old or 13, and she already had this spunk and joy that I don't remember having at her age. And she was laughing, and she was so excited to tell me about her TikTok account and how she was going viral, so she had to shut it down. And her little brother was like, "No, you're not." And I was just enjoying listening to these two banter. And driving home that night back to St. Catharines, I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is why this matters so much. Like, that little girl and that little boy are never going to not be able to wonder what is possible for them, because they just met someone who looks like them, who comes from a community that they come from, doing something like owning a brand that's available in a Sephora. And that's what I think is most special, because we all know when we can see it, we can be it.
That's so true. You need representation. You need to see adults in your world as a child, adults who are similar to you or that you can look up to. And when that doesn't exist in that space, there's almost like a dream gap where you don't know if you can get there or not. So you're offering this to a whole generation of children and young people. Tell me about one of the biggest problems that you have encountered and that you were able to overcome.
I think this idea of not ever knowing how it's going to happen. I think now, because I'm in this sort of the entrepreneur ecosystem and startup communities and scale up communities, that not thinking there was going to be enough money or how is this going to happen. And it's still always a challenge, capital. We're going as a organization for first ever seeking outside funding for people to be able to now become a part of Cheekbone Beauty and selling shares. So we're going for Series A in the next couple of weeks, which is really exciting. And then also realizing that there is a lot of capital out there and a lot of people, whether angels or institutional or private or social funding that's available, they're there as long as I think your business has something that the world doesn't yet know it needs. That's exciting. At the same time, as much as it's always been this idea of a challenge in my mind, I also think the challenge is seeing that the opportunity is there. It's just how we're going to get it.
So Jenn, tell me about what it is that you look forward to.
I'm looking forward to seeing a lot more businesses succeed, whether it's in the indigenous business space or women-owned and operated businesses. We know for so many generations that women don't receive the same amount of funding or investment as our counterparts. And I believe it's less than 2% funding goes to people of color, and it's less than like 9% of funding goes to women. And so there's a lot of room for improvement, and I'm looking forward to seeing that change.
And I'm hoping that people listening to this episode will get inspired if they're on the fence, because it is difficult to leave a well-paying job, something that, we call the golden handcuffs, where if you have a good pay, a good seniority, vacation, benefits, everything, needing to leave that to start a passion project. It's not always easy, especially if you have dependents, et cetera. So in your case, did you feel that? Did you feel that I'm on the fence, I should leave, I should not? What was the thought process?
Yeah, no, and I'm, very fortunate. I have an incredible husband that does very well financially. So I really didn't have that feeling. And I felt like I was already at a point in my life where I worked my ass off for 25 years. And so we owned multiple homes. I have nice cars and all of the things. And it's when you get to a point in life, you realize that material things really, like, it didn't seem as important. So I always knew I wasn't starting Cheekbone Beauty for money, regardless of, I guess, how wealthy people think they can get or be. That was not the reasoning. And I actually took, a pay cut to do this, but it didn't feel like it mattered. And maybe I'm, again, super fortunate that I had a partner it was okay, and we are going to be okay regardless of what happened. But I definitely can see a lot of friends that are actually single moms that jump into entrepreneurship. It is a big struggle, but also listening to them and that we share that view of like, no, this matters so much more than that. And maybe I have to make a couple sacrifices. And from my husband's end, he was like, what? You're going to do what? And it did
Yeah.
take him a couple years. I had to promise we weren't going on fancy vacations for a few years. He was supportive, but also scary. I think it was actually more scary for him, to be honest. He's like, you're going to give up your salary to do this and make no money for this amount of time.
And what's interesting is, when you have a partner who is supportive and wants to dream along with you, like, what does that make you feel?
Yeah, I don't. Sometimes I was like, he's definitely not the risk taker like me. I'm the one who's like, yeah, let's do it. So that's good because it's a balance, right? It's certainly a balance, and he's very analytical and logical, which is when you're more of a visionary style entrepreneur, you need someone to balance you out. And it's also many times, like this past summer, we went on a family holiday, and my daughter, who is 17, was reading Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, and he founded Nike. And it was this journey of how Nike became what it is today. And I remember my daughter literally came to me for the first time and said, Mom, oh my goodness, I finally get what you're doing and why some days you're like, the company is failing, we're going to lose everything. Because in the book, which I've also read, Phil almost loses Nike like 4 times because you run out of money or you don't know this thing you were building and something doesn't work out. And it was really an interesting moment that she read that and my husband's read it. And so now we are certainly much more of an entrepreneurial family that they understand because of, the experience of others, thankfully, that this is normal when you're an entrepreneur, that you may lose everything one day, or it can, the next day be like, wow, we just landed this incredible deal and now everything's okay again.
Yes, yes. You're constantly riding a wave.
Mm-hmm.
You're constantly on this precarious balancing act. And sometimes you're only as good as your last job, or you're only as good as the next contract. It's very precarious, as you say. And then I really believe that the more resilient entrepreneurs just know how to be good surfers, if for lack of a better
Oh, it's a great
analogy. And sometimes the ocean spits you out and brings you back to shore, but you got to get back in there at some point.
Yeah.
And it seems that that's what you've been doing. You have the skills and you have this passion, and all of this together is a wonderful recipe for bringing to the world a new concept and a new product and something that is eco-friendly and it is inclusive. So is this what you imagined it to be?
No, I'll be 100% honest. I had no idea. Like, I knew I wanted this brand, but to where we are today from those early days, I had no idea what was possible or how it would turn out. And I love that because I think that's even the next 5 years. And, we have these, strategic plans and visions and the way we think things are going to go. And it doesn't always turn out exactly like that plan, which I think is the really exciting part.
Thank you so much to Jenn Harper. You can learn more about Cheekbone Beauty through the link in the episode description. Jenn has also kindly offered our listeners 20% off all Cheekbone Beauty products. Click the link below and use the code ASSL20 at checkout. If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe to And So She Left wherever you listen. Your feedback helps us to better serve our current listeners and reach new ones. You can also fill out our quick feedback form. It's just 5 questions long, and your response helps us to make the show that you want to hear. And So She Left is made by Cansulta and Ethan Lee. We'll be back next Wednesday with a new episode. Our music is by Chris Zabriskie, edited for your enjoyment. You can find a list of all the songs you heard here in the episode notes. I'm Catherine Vasilopoulos, and thanks for listening.